Some families build you up, others break you piece by piece. I thought leaving them would be the end of my pain, the end of their hold over me. But I was wrong, because even miles away, their shadow still found me, lurking in phone calls, in strangers' stares, in the memory of a house where I was never truly welcome. And then, the invitation came. One dinner. No photographers. Just us. They called it reconciliation. I knew it was another trap. But I went anyway. Not to forgive, but to finish what I started. That night I saw the truth in their eyes. They didn't want me back, they wanted control. And for the first time I had the strength to say no. This is the story of the night I walked away for good. You are nothing to this family. Stop pretending you matter. Honestly, we forget you exist half the time. Those words weren't from a stranger on the street. They were from my own mother and brother, spoken across the dinner table like they were reading a grocery list. Do you know what it feels like to be invisible in your own home? To sit in a room full of people who share your blood and still feel like a ghost? You do. I was the youngest, the smallest, and apparently the easiest to erase. My father barely acknowledged me unless he needed someone to fetch his drink. My mother, well, she preferred to remind me that I was an accident. We didn't plan for you, she once said with a shrug. We made it work though. Made it work. Like I was some unwanted pet they kept out of obligation. As a child, I thought maybe if I studied hard, kept my head down and never caused trouble, they'd see me, notice me, love me maybe. But the truth is, some people don't want to love you no matter how easy you make it for them. I remember birthdays where my siblings got cakes, balloons, and gifts wrapped in shiny paper. Mine. A single candle stuck in a leftover cupcake, if they remembered at all. And when I say remembered, I mean if someone mentioned it in passing while clearing the dishes. The worst part wasn't the neglect. It was the small, deliberate cruelties. The way my mother would cut me off mid-sentence if I spoke. The way my brother would tell me my opinions didn't matter because I was too young to understand. The way my father would sigh when I entered a room, like my existence was a chore. There were moments that stung more than I could ever admit. Like the time I made them breakfast. Pancakes shaped like hearts, orange juice in their favorite glasses. My father didn't even touch his plate. My mother told me the pancakes were too sweet, and scraped them into the trash. My brother laughed and asked if I was trying to poison them. I stood there, smiling like it didn't matter, while inside I wanted to scream. For years I told myself it was normal, that every family had its flaws, that I should be grateful they put a roof over my head and food on the table. But gratitude can be a cage when it's demanded instead of earned. The breaking point came one summer evening. We were all seated for dinner. My parents, my two older brothers, and me. I had just been accepted into a prestigious art program, something I'd worked for since I was 12. I thought maybe this time they'd be proud. I waited until the plates were set, the wine poured, and the room quieted. Then I picked up my fork, tapped it gently against my glass and said, I have an announcement. My mother smirked. What, you finally got a job that pays? Laughter rippled across the table. I ignored it. I was accepted into the National Youth Art Program. Only 20 students get chosen from the entire country. Silence. Then my father cleared his throat. And how exactly will that pay your bills? I stared at him. It's not about money. It's about, don't waste our time with this nonsense, my mother cut in. We've got real problems to deal with. The words burned like acid. I looked around the table and saw nothing but indifference. My brothers went back to eating, my father took another sip of wine, and my mother avoided my eyes entirely. In that moment something inside me snapped. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't beg for them to understand. I just sat there, letting their indifference sink deep into my bones, hardening into something unbreakable. I realized then that they would never see me the way I needed to be seen, and if they couldn't give me the validation I craved, I'd take something else instead. That night, alone in my room, I stared at the ceiling for hours. My childhood played in fragments. Every insult, every ignored achievement, every look that said I was in the way. I started writing. Not letters or journal entries, but plans. Little ideas that grew darker with each passing day. I didn't know exactly what my revenge would look like yet, but I knew one thing: it had to hurt. Not physically, but in a way they'd never forget. I studied them the way a hunter studies prey. I learned my mother's biggest fear was public embarrassment. I noticed my father's pride in his business reputation. My brothers. They lived for social approval, terrified of looking weak. People like my family thrived on power, control over the narrative, control over my self-worth. My revenge would be about taking that control back, piece by piece, until there was nothing left for them to hold over me. The first step was patience. I had to play the role they'd written for me. The quiet, insignificant shadow. The less they suspected, the more devastating the reveal would be when the time came. So I smiled when they insulted me. I nodded when they dismissed me. I acted like their words slid right off my skin, even when they cut deep. And every night, I went back to my room and added another line to my growing list of ways to make them regret underestimating me. By the time autumn came, my plan was no longer a vague idea. It was a roadmap. I knew their weaknesses, their secrets, the things they cared about most. And I knew exactly how to use each one against them. They thought I was invisible. They had no idea I'd become the most dangerous person in the room. The first crack appeared on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. It was subtle, barely a tremor, but I felt it. My father came home earlier than usual, his tie loose, his face tight with frustration. He dropped his briefcase on the table and snapped at my mother. "Do you have any idea what people are saying about me?" She blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" "That dinner last week. That stupid story you told in front of my clients about me forgetting our anniversary. Do you know how that makes me look?" I stood at the kitchen counter, pretending to scroll through my phone. But inside I was storing every word like ammunition. My father's ego wasn't just fragile, it was glass. All it would take was the right hit to shatter it completely. Over the next few weeks, I started feeding the cracks. Nothing obvious. Nothing that could be traced back to me. Just tiny seeds, whispered in the right ears at the right time. A casual comment to one of his associates about a strange business decision he'd made. A subtle mention to my mother's charity friends about her odd mood swings. Little truths, mixed with carefully chosen lies, designed to travel on their own. If I had learned anything growing up in that house, it was that my family thrived on appearances. They needed the world to believe they were perfect, successful, untouchable. I would make sure that mask started to slip. Slowly, then all at once. But my revenge wasn't just about watching them fall. It was about making them feel the way they had made me feel. Powerless, voiceless, and small. The first real test came when my mother hosted her annual charity gala. It was her pride and joy, a chance to parade herself as a benevolent queen among the town's elite. I had always been given the same job at these events, to stay out of the way. This time I didn't just stay out of the way. I became the shadow behind the curtain. I overheard her bragging to a group of guests about a donation she had supposedly made to fund a local children's program. I knew for a fact she hadn't donated a penny. It was my father's company that had funded it, for the tax write-off. I didn't confront her then. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I made sure the program's director got a copy of the real donation records, slipped anonymously into his mailbox. The fallout came 3 days later when whispers spread that my mother had been lying about her charitable contributions. She denied it, of course. But denial sounds a lot like guilt when people already want to believe the worst. And my father. His temper exploded when the rumors reached him. Not because he cared about the truth, but because it made them both look bad. The cracks between them widened, and I stood at the edge, watching with quiet satisfaction. Still, I had to be careful. They couldn't know it was me. My revenge wasn't meant to be quick. It was meant to be permanent. That's when I turned my attention to my brothers. They had always been golden boys in my parents' eyes. Handsome, charming, and dripping with the kind of confidence you only get from never hearing the word no. But they had weaknesses too. The eldest, Daniel, had a gambling problem. The younger, Chris, had a habit of sending inappropriate messages to women he barely knew. I didn't need to invent anything. I just needed to let the truth find daylight. Started with Daniel. I casually mentioned to my father one evening that I'd seen him meeting with someone shady near the racetrack. My father laughed it off at first, until Daniel came to him asking for money a week later. The argument was loud enough for me to hear through my bedroom wall. My father's voice was cold, my brother's desperate. By the end of it, Daniel stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the glass. Chris was even easier. All it took was one carefully forwarded screenshot to a mutual acquaintance, someone who loved drama more than breathing. Within days, the messages were everywhere. Chris tried to spin it as a joke, but the damage to his image was already done. Piece by piece, I was taking from them the only thing they valued, control. And the beauty of it was that they still didn't suspect me. One night, I sat in my room with the rain tapping at the window and realized something that chilled me. I wasn't just doing this to get back at them anymore. I was enjoying it. There was a certain satisfaction in watching the people who had belittled me for years stumble in the dark, unaware I was the one moving the obstacles in their path. But there was still one thing left. The final act. The moment that would ensure they could never recover from the blow. Had to be big, public, unforgivable. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. My father's company was set to receive a prestigious award for excellence in business ethics. The irony nearly made me laugh out loud. I knew what I had to do. In the weeks leading up to the ceremony, I gathered everything I had. Documents, emails, financial records. I'd been collecting them for months, quietly photographing papers left on desks, forwarding myself accidentally sent attachments. My father had made more than a few questionable deals over the years, the kind that would destroy his reputation if they ever came to light. The night before the event, I sat at my desk and organized everything into a neat, damning package. I didn't sign my name. I didn't leave a trace. I just made sure that every major journalist in the city had a copy waiting in their inbox by morning. As I hit send, I felt something shift inside me. This was it. The point of no return. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the storm to break. Part of me wondered if I'd gone too far. If maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance to pull back. But then I remembered every cold glance, every dismissive laugh, every birthday they'd forgotten. Well, this was exactly as far as I needed to go. The next morning, the headlines hit like a tidal wave. Words like corruption, fraud, and illegal dealings screamed from every screen and newspaper. By the time my father arrived at the award ceremony, the air was already thick with whispers. He never even made it to the stage. And I stayed home, sipping tea by the window, watching the rain wash the world clean. When the headlines broke, my phone didn't stop buzzing. Messages from old classmates, distant relatives, and people I barely knew all lit up my screen with the same tone. Half shock, half glee. The mighty had fallen, and the world was eating it up. I ignored them all. Instead, I sat in the quiet, the low hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the house. My tea had gone cold in my hands, but I didn't care. I was waiting. It took less than an hour before my father's car screeched into the driveway. The slam of the door echoed through the walls, followed by the heavy thud of his footsteps. "Where is she?" His voice was sharp enough to slice through steel. I stayed in the kitchen, my back to the doorway. I heard him enter, his breath uneven. "Do you have any idea what's happening out there?" he demanded. "Yes," I said calmly, still facing the counter. "Then why are you sitting here like nothing's wrong?" I turned to look at him, really look at him. His suit was rumpled, his tie askew. His face pale except for the angry flush creeping up his neck. He looked smaller somehow. "Because," I said, "nothing is wrong." The silence that followed was heavy, thick enough to choke on. My mother appeared in the doorway a moment later, her mascara smudged, her hands trembling. "People are calling me a fraud," she whispered. They're saying I lied about everything. I met her eyes, unblinking. Didn't you? The shock on her face would have been almost comical if it weren't so pathetic. For the first time, she seemed to realize that I wasn't just some quiet shadow in the corner. I was a threat. They didn't accuse me outright. Not yet. They were too busy putting out the fires raging outside. But suspicion was a seed, and I could feel it taking root in their minds. Over the next few days, the house turned into a war zone. My father was constantly on the phone, shouting at lawyers and publicists. My mother locked herself in her room, emerging only to throw sharp, paranoid glances at me. My brothers stopped calling altogether. The perfect family facade had shattered, and the shards were cutting everyone who tried to pick them up. It should have felt like victory, and it did at first. But then came the quiet. The quiet was worse than the shouting, worse than the chaos. It was in that silence that I started to hear things I didn't want to hear. My own thoughts, my own doubts. Had I gone too far? Had I become the very thing I hated? The questions gnawed at me, even as I tried to push them away. I told myself they deserved it. Every lie, every manipulation, every public humiliation, they'd earned it. But the truth was harder to swallow. I had changed. One evening, as I sat in the living room scrolling through the latest articles, my father walked in. He didn't look angry anymore, just tired. "Why?" he asked. No accusation, no rage. Just that single word. I set my phone down. "You really don't know," said. He shook his head slowly. "I know we weren't perfect parents, but..." He trailed off, searching for the right words. "You weren't parents at all," I said, my voice flat. "You were dictators. You controlled everything, what I wore, who I spoke to, what I could be. And when I didn't fit your picture, you erased me. I was invisible in my own home." For a moment he didn't speak. Then, to my surprise, he sat down across from me. "I thought we were preparing you for the real world," he said quietly. "No," I replied. "You were preparing me to be like you." And I refused. We sat there in the heavy stillness, two people who had spent years avoiding each other's truths. The next day, my mother tried her turn. She caught me in the kitchen, her voice soft, almost pleading. "Whatever you think we did, whatever you think we deserve, you've made your point. Please, stop this before there's nothing left." I looked at her and realized she wasn't worried about losing me. She was worried about losing everything else, the status, the image, the power. And in that moment, I knew there was no undoing what I had done. The calls from journalists eventually slowed, but the damage was permanent. My father's company lost major clients, his name forever linked to scandal. My mother's charity work became a joke, her invitations to high society events drying up overnight. My brothers found themselves unwelcome in circles they had once ruled. They still didn't know for sure it was me, but I think deep down they suspected. I thought the satisfaction would last forever. But satisfaction is a fleeting thing. It doesn't fill the empty spaces left behind. One night, I dreamed of our family dinners, how they used to be before everything turned cold. I woke up with tears on my face, though I couldn't tell if they were for what I'd lost or for what I'd destroyed. A month later, I packed my bags. I didn't tell them where I was going. I just left a note on the kitchen table. "You taught me to survive by any means necessary." I just never said whose rules I'd follow. I walked out without looking back. The city felt different once I was free of their shadows. I found a small apartment with peeling paint and creaky floors, but it was mine. Every choice I made from then on was mine. Sometimes I'd hear a rumor about my family, another business deal gone wrong, another social snub, and I'd feel that old spark of vindication. But more often I felt nothing. Because the truth is, revenge doesn't give you closure. It doesn't fix the past. It just leaves you standing in the ruins, wondering if you've won or if you've lost everything. Still, I don't regret it. They taught me to play the game, and I played it better than they ever could. And if they ever try to rebuild, I'll be there, watching from the shadows, ready to remind them that some betrayals never fade. 6 months had passed since I left. 6 months of silence from the people who had once controlled every breath I took. The city had learned my name now, not because of them but because of me. I had found work, not glamorous but honest. And I was building something small, something mine. Some nights I still caught myself listening for the sound of my father's car in the driveway, or my mother's footsteps in the hall. The ghost of that house still followed me, whispering through the walls of my new apartment. But ghosts, I had learned, are patient. One rainy evening, I was closing up the small bookstore where I worked when the phone on the counter rang. It was late, too late for customers. "Hello," I answered cautiously. There was only breathing on the other end. Then a voice, low and ragged. "I know it was you." Froze. It wasn't my father's voice or my mother's but my brother's. The oldest, the one who had always played their golden child. "What do you want?" I asked, keeping my tone even. "Not money. Not an apology," he said. "I want you to know that they're planning something. They want to fix their image, and they're starting with you." The words hit harder than I expected. Me. Yes. They think if they can get you back, smiling in some family photo, they can convince everyone they've changed. I almost laughed. The thought of standing beside them again was absurd. But then my brother's voice softened. "They'll come for you. They don't like losing." I hung up without another word. For the next week, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Passing cars slowed near my building. Strangers lingered outside the bookstore. Every creak in the hallway sounded like a footstep meant for me. And then they made their move. A letter arrived in my mailbox. Heavy paper, gold-embossed edges. Their way of reminding me that they still lived in a different world. Inside was an invitation. Family dinner. No photographers. Just us. Part of me wanted to tear it to shreds. But another part wanted to see them again. Not for reconciliation but for something sharper. When the night came, I chose my clothes carefully. Not to impress them, but to make a statement. Black from head to toe, a color they had always forbidden because it was too morbid for a young girl. Their house looked the same, but it felt different. The lights were dimmer, the garden overgrown, the air heavy with the smell of wilted flowers. My father opened the door. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You look well," he said, as though it pained him to admit it. Inside, my mother was already seated at the table. Her hands folded like she was praying. My brothers were there too, both avoiding my gaze. Dinner began in brittle silence. The clink of silverware was the only sound until my father spoke. "We've all made mistakes," he began. "But I think it's time we put the past behind us." I took a slow sip of wine. "Mistakes? Is that what you call it?" My mother flinched. "We're offering you a chance to be part of the family again." "No," I said simply. The air tightened. "You think you're better than us now?" my father asked, his voice rising. "No," I replied. "I think I'm free." It was my brother, the same one who had warned me, who broke the moment. He set down his fork and looked at me with something almost like pride. "She's right," he said. "We can't fix this. And we shouldn't try." That was when I realized why he had called me weeks ago. He wasn't warning me out of fear for them. He was warning me because he was done too. My father's face darkened. My mother's lip trembled. The perfect picture was crumbling again, and I had barely lifted a finger. I stood, leaving my half-finished plate behind. This dinner was never about forgiveness. It was about control. You still think you can pull me back into your world. But I've burned that bridge, and I'll burn the ashes too if I have to. As I walked to the door, my father called after me. "You'll regret this." I didn't turn around. I already did. Once. Never again. The night air outside was cold and wet, but it felt cleaner than the air in that house ever had. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. 2 weeks later, the newspapers exploded with a new scandal. Not about my father's business or my mother's charity, but about my brother. The golden child had finally decided to speak, and he didn't hold back. He told them everything. The lies, the manipulation, the abuse. He gave them the kind of proof I never could. And for the first time, it wasn't my hands lighting the match. I watched from my apartment as their empire finally collapsed for good. Their names became poison, their photos symbols of hypocrisy. They couldn't hide behind wealth or status anymore. And I realized something. Revenge doesn't always have to be loud. Sometimes it's quiet, patient. Sometimes it comes from the least expected place. I never spoke to my brother again. We didn't need to. We had both chosen our own ways to break free. Now, when I think of them, it's not with rage or sorrow. It's with a strange, cold clarity. They were never going to change. And I was never going back. I still keep that dinner invitation, tucked away in a drawer, not as a memento but as a reminder. That night I walked away for the last time. That night I chose myself over the family name, over the comfort of familiarity, over the trap of their approval. And I will never ever forget how it felt to breathe without their shadow over me. Because in the end, survival wasn't about destroying them. It was about refusing to be destroyed by them.